Just days into the U.S. brokered ceasefire, an Israeli soldier is killed in Rafah. U.S. President Trump says Israel should fight back. But first, JNS CEO Alex Traiman reports from the Republican Jewish Coalition's 40th anniversary event in Las Vegas. These stories and much more on this week's Jerusalem Minute. And welcome back to Jerusalem Minute here on JNS TV. My name is Josh Hasten, correspondent for JNS News. I am in my home studio of Gush, Etzion, Israel, while Alex Traiman is very, very busy representing JNS across the ocean in Las Vegas at the Republican Jewish Coalition's annual gathering. Alex, good to see you all the way over there.
Good to see you, Josh.
Let's first get an update on this year's RJC. It is now Sunday morning, your time in Las Vegas, and the convention is wrapping up this morning. Give us some highlights. Talk about what the most important things that you saw and things that were said at this year's event.
Well, Josh, what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas. So I'm not sure we can talk about it. Well, actually, it was a great event. About 1,000 people here. You had many senators and congressmen, particularly Jewish congressmen. The event was led off by Senator Ted Cruz, and you also had Minister of Strategic Affairs Ron Dermer, who received the Architect of Peace Award last night, and talked about the importance of the U.S. Israel alliance. I think he made an incredible case for the national security interests of the United States and also the business interests of the United States as to why Israel not only is of value to the United States, but actually is the most important ally in the entire world to the United States from a dollar for dollar perspective, and demonstrated why the military aid that Israel receives from the United States actually is a bargain for the United States and makes a lot of sense if you only make the case. And he urged people to make the case. He said the case is very easy. The problem is that people don't make it. And so he urged people to actually make that case. He talked about Israel's Air Force, the technology that it develops and shares with the United States, the fact that it sits in one of the most dangerous regions of the world, but a region in which the United States has a lot of interest, and how Israel is the boots on the ground that protects that interest so that U.S. boots don't have to come on the ground over here. Again, the case was extremely compelling, and it was good to see him receive an award. Not only for helping to forge this ceasefire in the past month, but also he's one of the major brokers of the Abraham Accords agreements when he was serving as the ambassador in Washington. Ambassador to the UN, Danny Danon, was also here. Lots of media personalities, including my good friend Sid Rosenberg, my good friend Mark Levin, and JNS actually held a reception here just prior to the beginning of the event, and we had an absolutely incredible fireside chat between myself and Mark Levin, and that should be going up onto the JNS channel in the coming days.
Sounds great, Alex. I know JNS also had a presence throughout the conference and was interviewing top congressional leaders, senators, and whatnot. So everybody should go to JNS TV on YouTube.
I'd also like to just put a great shout out to the leadership of the Republican Jewish Coalition. Matt Brooks, who's the CEO, Norm Coleman, the national chairman, and Alex Siegel, the COO, for putting together a great event. It was about 1,000 people here. And I would also like to say that for them, and one of the recurring themes throughout the conference was really addressing anti-Semitism. They talked about how the Democratic Party long ago decided that it did not want to be a pro-Israel party, and no longer is a pro-Israel party, but that the same threads that we're starting to see on the left side are creeping in to the Republican Party on the right side. And you heard speaker after speaker after speaker saying that anti-Semitism cannot exist in America and absolutely cannot exist in the current party of the Republican Party. So they are aware of the threat. A lot of talk about Tucker Carlson, Candace Owens, and others, Nick Fuentes, and just asserting that there's no room for that, and also providing some examples in the past regarding, let's say, David Duke, Pat Buchanan, others, that had been bringing anti-Israel, even potentially anti-Semitic rhetoric into the conversation within the Republican Party and how the Republican Party dealt with it. And I think that there was a hope that the party would take this threat seriously and would kick it out and basically get rid of it, so that it will no longer be a threat.
Thanks for that update, Alex. And again, people should go to JNS TV and also JNS.org and check out all the updates from this important event, the 40th anniversary, if I'm not mistaken, of the Republican Jewish Coalition. Now, Alex, while you're over there was breaking news here just over the last several hours. Israeli authorities, as reported by JNS, this afternoon filed charges against a 14-year-old Arab citizen, I believe from the town of Ramleh, who allegedly sought to carry out terrorist attacks, including the assassination of Prime Minister Netanyahu on behalf of Al Qaeda. So here Israel's dealing with Hamas for the last 2 years, and Al Qaeda apparently still alive and well. And you had an Israeli Arab, an Arab with citizenship of the state of Israel, recruited to try to carry out attacks, including potentially the assassination of Israel's prime minister. We know Iran has tried to assassinate Prime Minister Netanyahu in the past.
I think that if anybody believes that this war that we've just been in for the last 2 years, which really began with the Hamas attack on October 7th from the Gaza Strip and is culminated in the last theater being the Gaza Strip. But if people think that this is like some kind of a war that Israel launched against the Palestinian people, that's absolutely incorrect. This is a war that Israel's fought on 7 fronts against Hamas, against the Hezbollah, against the Houthis, against the Khatib Hezbollah, which has in Iraq and Syria, but also the head of this terror snake, which is in Iran. And you see that it's really a global jihad, whereby you have this both s- Shiite Islamic terror organizations like Hezbollah being led by Shiite Iran attacking Israel, but also working with Sunni terror organizations like Hamas. And now you also see Al Qaeda being part of it. And I think that an important component here is that they really see Israel as not that it's not that it's like an occupying force against the Gazans and the Palestinians, but rather that it's an outpost of Western values in the Middle East. And you see that there is a push to have a takeover, and first things first to take over their own neighborhood. And they see that Israel needs to fall first in order for them to expand. But before I came to Las Vegas on this trip, I was actually in Budapest, Hungary, for several days. There was a pro-Israel conference that was being run by the Center for Fundamental Rights, a very, very important think tank in Hungary, which has strong connections to Viktor Orban's ruling party. And you saw there how concerned they were about Islamic takeover of Europe. So you see here that they see Israel being the tip of the spear, and you can see the way if Al Qaeda is getting involved, that it really is what the prime minister has been saying all along, which is that our victory over these terror organizations is actually the victory of all of Western civilization.
Alex, turning now to the situation in Gaza, of course, we have a ceasefire, but Israel still reserves the right to strike when there is a terrorist threat. Unfortunately, this past week, you did have an Israeli reservist, a soldier who was killed by Hamas terrorists in Gaza. President Trump on Wednesday expressing support for Israeli strikes following that attack targeting that soldier. So, again, it seems to me it's very similar to the situation in the north with Hezbollah. While even though there is a ceasefire, Hamas still trying to carry out attacks and Israel reserving the rights to go after these terrorists who are, they're violating the ceasefire left and right. And we'll talk in a little bit more about the fact that Hamas is still playing games in terms of returning the remains of those Israelis who they murdered in Gaza. But let's start with Israel's strategy right now in terms of the ceasefire and reserving the right to strike when necessary.
Well, I think you have to look at the ceasefire deal in terms of the goals that the government of Israel had for the ceasefire deal. Really, what they wanted first and foremost was to remove this ace card from Hamas, which is the hostages, and to bring the hostages home. That was the primary goal, and the understanding that Hamas is not going to release the hostages unless there was a comprehensive agreement that led towards the end of the conflict. Now, the brilliance of the deal, and there are some parts of the deal that are very bitter to swallow, including the release of 250 terrorists, which we discussed in previous shows. But the brilliant components of the deal is that the hostages, the living ones, got released on day one of the deal. Basically, we signed the deal, and within 72 hours, the living hostages were home. This is the last remaining major ace card. But the deal also talks about the disarming of Hamas and the demilitarization of the entire Gaza Strip. But Israel maintains control of 53% of Gaza and will not leave until Hamas all of a sudden is quiet and the area is safe for an extended period of time. And Israel does reserve the right to go in and attack if they are attacked. If quiet is not being kept, that the IDF does not have its hands tied. And you could see that the president of the United States has the same view of the agreement as Israel does, because he's saying that if Israelis are targeted, that they should strike back. And they've been stating over and over again, both the Israelis and the Americans, that Hamas has the obligation to disarm, and they can do it the easy way or they can do it the hard way. At the same time, President Trump saying that there will not be U.S. boots on the ground. Um, what this international stabilization force will look like, we don't really know. At this point, Israel has been clear it's not going to be Qatar, it's not going to be Turkey, it's not going to be the Palestinian Authority, it's not going to be Hamas. We don't know who it's going to be. But in absence of a force that can actually disarm Hamas, the only party that's going to do that is the IDF, and that's what Netanyahu and Trump talk about being the hard way. Meanwhile, Israel is giving the opportunity, the space for quiet to envelop, and particularly as they're trying to get back the final remains of the dead bodies that Hamas is holding. So I think that there's a bit of restraint during this period. Certainly, they are responding to terror attacks on their soldiers, but otherwise, restraint until you get all the dead bodies back, and then we'll see whether the IDF takes a more offensive posture in Gaza.
Yeah, Alex, the big problem, though, right now is the fact that Hamas says that they're returning the remains of hostages when, in fact, several times this week, they've returned remains of others, not the hostages. So Hamas continues to play games. They're also staging these events in which they claim they're going to go and retrieve the bodies when they're actually planting bodies in the ground. All types of shenanigans, very sadly, for those families who are desperately waiting for the remains of their loved ones to be brought back home. Yet Hamas still not willing to fulfill their obligations under the ceasefire deal. From what I understand, I believe Hamas has only returned about 15 of the 28 or so bodies. That's the last count I had. And just last night, again, they returned some remains, but apparently they were not actually those hostages who they kidnapped and murdered.
Yeah, unthinkable psychological torture for the families of those that have believed missing or believed missing in Gaza. And there's a few reasons why it's super important to get all of the bodies back. Certainly, closure for the families is number one. To Israelis, it's important to put those bones in the ground in peace and quiet, and to end the suffering of these families. But also, you want to have the remains of all the bodies left, because you don't want a situation in which you find out later that actually that there was maybe one or more living hostage, right? So, Israel is working off of intelligence that at the very end that there were 20 living hostages, and they were pretty certain about the fates of the remaining bodies. But there was uncertainty about one or two of the hostages, and you don't want to get in a situation where there's two people unaccounted for, and then you find out later that actually there's additional living hostages in the Gaza Strip. So you want to get back every single one of these living and dead hostages, that that the entire event has closure, not only closure for the families, but the psychological torture game is that's been one of the cards that Hamas had to play. Of course, getting back the living hostages is much more pressing than getting back the bodies. Getting back the bodies is very important, secondarily important, and Israel's going to be patient with the process. Um, we have to just, not be, twisted by Hamas's games at this point, and just let this process, run itself out, and to realize that this is a desperate and wounded tiger in Hamas, and this is the only, this is the only thing that they can do at this point to get at the Israelis. And so, let's just recognize what it is, and that hopefully that this is a terror organization that is if not dying, at least wounded to the extent of complete quiet after this period finishes.
Alex, today in Israel, it's actually a very special day. A lot of traffic in southern Jerusalem in the area of Bethlehem and Gush Etzion, and that is because it is the yahrzeit, the Askara of our mother Rachel. Rachel, married to Jacob in the Bible. This is her anniversary, the anniversary of her death, and thousands of Israelis descend upon Rachel's tomb. The reason I'm telling you all this and telling the viewers all this is the fact that a terrorist who was just released in one of the last hostage deals who was set free, there was a plan, a diabolical plan by this terrorists to go to the tomb of Rachel today and carry out a mega terrorist attack. Terrorist was caught a year ago with explosive devices, and apparently he was set free and went right back into making explosives and planned on detonating, according to the Israeli police and other sources, detonating bombs targeting the thousands of people at the tomb of Rachel today. So again, you have the dangers of releasing terrorists. Of course, we're very happy the hostages are home, the live hostages, and please God, those who will be brought back for burial very, very soon. But this was the danger which we are talking about. Thank God this plot was thwarted by the IDF and Israeli police.
Yeah, three important points here, as you mentioned. Number one is that we do know that those who are released from prison uh, go back to acts of terror. They're not rehabilitated in the Israeli prisons. It's not like you sat for 10 years in jail and now, you're just a normal person back in society. These are people that continue to be incited to violence even while they're in prison. They're sitting there with their Hamas mates. It's a badge of honor for them to be in the Israeli jails. And when they go back, they oftentimes go back to acts of terror. We have a lot of data on just how many terrorists go back to committing acts of terror. I remember Yahya Sinwar, the former head of Hamas, was released in the Gilad Shalit deal. And when you talk about getting the hostages back, it's not a trade hostages for hostages. It's innocent civilians that were taken from their homes or from a music festival, on a weekend, and we're getting 20 of them back, and the Palestinian people are getting back hundreds, if not thousands, of terrorists that were committing acts of terror and murder against Jews, and they're going back into society. So you see the immorality of the deal. But the second component here is just how Palestinians will attack Israelis on a holiday. October 7th was Simchat Torah. It was a Jewish holiday. There's no respect for Jewish holy day. And the opposite, you see that it's a for them it's a holy war because you wouldn't attack another people's on their holy day if you didn't consider that to be an important day to strike them. And the same thing, it's not just holy times, but also holy spaces, right? The tomb of Rachel is one of the holiest spaces in the Jewish geography. It's in Bethlehem for Christians. That's the birthplace of Jesus. That's where Rachel's buried. It's talked about in the book of Genesis that Jacob buried her on the road. And you had this like beautiful little gravesite in the 90s that would have been there for thousands of years. And then with the signing of the Oslo Accords and Intifadas, Bethlehem was turned over to Palestinian Authority control. We saw in the 90s that Yasser Arafat and his henchmen took the Church of the Nativity hostage for like more than a month, I believe. And in addition to that, we saw lots of terrorist attacks at the Tomb of Rachel. And if you go to the Tomb of Rachel, it doesn't look like this beautiful little shrine. It's a fortress.
Right.
There's a whole fortress that was built around the Tomb of Rachel with concrete blocks on both sides of the access road for Jews and other worshipers to go in, so they will not be fired at. And again, like this, a major fortress around it to protect the Jewish people's ability to worship at the Jewish holy site. And what's ironic about it is that you have like other people. Um, even like JD Vance and others, insinuating that, Israel needs to do more to protect uh, the sanctity of Christian sites for Christians when you see that it's Palestinian terrorists that attack both Christian sites and Jewish sites, and rather it's the IDF that defends not only the Jews' right to pray in a place, but on Christmas Eve, for example, when people come to the Church of Nativity, who is the ones that are facilitating those visits? That's the IDF. And not only that, they're even protecting Muslim holy places. So, for example, on the Temple Mount itself, which is the Muslims refer to it as one of their holy places, and you have the Al Aqsa Mosque on the Temple Mount. You have Israeli police securing the right of Muslims to go pray in their holy place. The only force that protects the rights of people to pray in holy places of any religions is Israel and the IDF. And if the IDF wasn't doing that, all of these places would be ransacked, and the worshipers at all of these places would be targets.
Absolutely. Alex, I want to switch gears here. Prime Minister Netanyahu this week visited the joint U.S. Israeli Command Center in the northern Negev city of Kiryat Gat. That was this past Wednesday. The center was established to oversee the implementation of the Gaza ceasefire agreement. I want to talk to you about the significance of the United States, obviously Israel's best friend, and no doubt tremendous support as you're seeing in Las Vegas among the Republican Party and among the current administration in Washington. What those significance of the fact that we have another country, albeit our best friend, having a command center in one of our cities there in southern Israel. What do you make of that?
Well, I understand why a lot of Israelis don't like it. Israel defends itself by itself, but I do think that there is some degree of importance here, and even a little bit of a brilliance in having a U.S. command center in Israel to deal with Gaza. And what the deal does, it puts the United States in charge of the rebuilding project. The president of the United States talked about a board of peace, and he said that he would be himself the chairman of that board, even though he's very busy. He noted that several times, that other countries wanted to be part of this board of peace that would oversee the rebuilding effort in Gaza. And why this is extremely important. Let's say, for example, that Israel just decided at some point that the war was over. Even if they had gone a little bit further and completely finished off Hamas, and there's nobody shooting over there, then the war is over. But then you have all of this death and destruction basically in the Gaza Strip. Israel has leveled some 70% of the Gaza Strip. People say, according to estimates, that maybe 80 to 90% of the residential buildings in Gaza are uninhabitable. Okay. If the United States and other countries had not committed to the effort to rebuild the Gaza Strip, that would have left the entire burden uh, of the situation on Israel. It would have been Israel's responsibility. Not to say that Israel was going to pay for it, because Israel was not going to pay for it, but the burden in terms of the international pressure would have been on Israel to take care of the deal. Meanwhile, here you have the situation which the United States and other countries in the Arab world, including the Qataris and the Emiratis and potentially the Saudis and others, are saying that they will be responsible for the rebuilding effort. And what that does is it kind of takes Israel off the hook for that. They're saying, we got it. We understand. We know what Israel did. We supported them up until this point. We got Israel and Hamas to sign the ceasefire agreement. We got the remaining hostages out, and we're going to be the ones that take over that rebuilding effort. And this way, also, there is a pathway toward a rebuilding in Gaza, provided, of course, that Hamas is disarmed and that Gaza becomes demilitarized. And what that does is it allows to deflect a lot of the international criticism on Israel because the ceasefire does not stop the humanitarian situation that exists in Gaza today. And there is a serious humanitarian situation in Gaza. And you want somebody else to be responsible for. I think Israel wants somebody else to be responsible for that. And so having the United States on the ground in Kiryat Gat, that also means to say, look, they're sitting in the place of their Israeli ally, which is being facilitated by Israel, that they're working with Israel, but ultimately that they're taking the responsibility for what happens inside the Gaza Strip with regard to rebuilding. They're going to be the ones that enforce, from a diplomatic point of view, the agreement, and they also in position to block any funding from coming into any area of the Gaza Strip that is not quiet and disarmed.
Alex, I want to look to the north. We mentioned Hezbollah before, but the question I have is, are Lebanon and Israel headed for another round? And you had the Lebanese president ordering the country's armed forces this week to oppose any Israeli incursions in the country's south following an IDF raid that reportedly killed a municipal worker. Obviously, Israel doesn't strike municipal workers, we strike Hezbollah. And unfortunately, there is collateral damage, and that's the reality of war. But the president ordered the army to confront any Israeli incursion into the liberated southern territory in defense of Lebanese territory and the safety of citizens. This was during a meeting with an army chief, according to a statement from the president's office. And Hezbollah applauded this decision by the Lebanese leader. I mean, over the last year or two since the war, we've seen sort of a distancing between the government and army and on one side and Hezbollah on the other. But are we potentially headed for another round with Hezbollah, maybe with the support of the Lebanese army at this juncture?
I don't think so. You see that Hezbollah was deterred, and they did not get involved. They didn't fire one rocket or try any attacks on Israel during that 12-day war in which Israel attacked against the Iranian air defenses and nuclear facilities. And Hezbollah was set up to be the deterrence against Israel for attacking those nuclear facilities. So clearly, if they did not get engaged during that 12-day war, I don't really see them getting engaged now. Uh, in terms of the Lebanese president, Israel is doing the Lebanese people a major favor by removing the threat of radical extremism from Hezbollah. They're doing a job that they know that the Lebanese army is either unwilling or incapable of doing. But by removing those weapons, removing those terrorist heads from Lebanon, what they're actually doing is cleansing that population to allow what you have now a Christian president in Lebanon to restore Lebanon, to get it to a place where it could be a functioning country once again, without a major terrorist organization threatening Israel, threatening them, and being members of the parliament in Lebanon. And not only do I think that you're not going to get to another round of two-sided armed conflict between Israel and Lebanon, but you actually have a greater likelihood of a normalization agreement between Israel and Lebanon in the coming months or year or years ahead, provided that the IDF does succeed in making sure that Hezbollah does not reorganize and rebuild its military capabilities.
Alex, before we let you go, earlier you mentioned the collaboration between Israeli and American companies there at the RJC. I think it's appropriate we read this headline here. Last year, 648 Israeli founded companies in New York pulled in some $8.6 billion in earnings, created over 28,000 jobs, contributed 13.3 billion in value to the state economy. This is just in New York, according to a new report from the United States Israel Business Alliance. You have all these haters on social media, on X and others, saying and claiming that the US just gives and gives and gives and Israel just takes. Essentially, an anti Semitic trope, if you will, against the state of Israel and the Jewish people. We just take and take. And what benefit does it have for the US? And here's proof. This is just one instance, one state, which made the headlines here in this 2025 New York Israel Economic Impact Report. It's unbelievable how much synergy there is, how much collaboration there is, how much Israel is actually providing to the United States, despite all of the claims by those haters. I want you to comment on that.
Well, you see, that all of the credit ratings in companies like Moody's and others that they were, threatening that the war was going to destabilize Israel's economy and that Israel's credit rating should be reduced. And what have we seen through this war? That the Israeli shekel is much stronger than, relative to the dollar than it was at the beginning of the war 2 years ago. That the overall investment into Israel has not been reduced at all, that Israeli companies are thriving on NASDAQ. And I think that, Israel is one of the leaders, maybe number two or number three in terms of countries outside the United States that have companies on NASDAQ. And that's in a country that only has 10 million people. So the value that Israel's providing in terms of development of technologies, and those are technologies that power people's communications, phones, travel, but also defense. Israel is not only a country that defends itself by itself, but that creates incredible technologies for surveillance, and for both defensive and offensive security systems that countries around the world are buying. So, Israel it provides tremendous value to the entire free world, and people are benefiting from Israeli technology every single day, whether they want to or not. And this is why I think ultimately, one of the reasons why I think that Israel is in much stronger position than it was prior to October 7th. Number one, because we've defeated or like really neutered these terror threats, on our borders. Number two, we have just raised an entire generation of new leadership, people that looked evil in the face, took up arms, saved lives, protected the Jewish home front and the Jewish people, hopefully for the next several decades based on what they did, and that the Israeli economy and the technology development continues to remain strong. So yeah, I think Israel's in a very good position, and I'm very hopeful that with the end of this conflict, with the bringing home of the remaining bodies, with the disarmament of Hamas, with the beginning of a rebuilding process in Gaza, and all this is going to take months to really get moving in a way in which we can tell like where the momentum is headed. Like right now, we're in a period of a little bit of uncertainty. People are trying to figure out, what the path forward is for Israel, for Gaza, for Hamas, for everybody. But you see that the markers for strong economy and a strong future for Israel are still there. And so this is just another piece of good news that demonstrates that Israel is a military power, Israel is a technological power, Israel is a rising economic power as well.
Alex, I know this is the last day of the RJC. Usually they have a big brunch on Sunday morning with a speaker or two. Let us know who is going to be speaking if you know this morning, and where are you going after Las Vegas representing JNS on your travels there?
Well, I'm going to be speaking this
Oh,
morning, Josh.
awesome. I didn't even know. This was not staged, folks. Awesome. That's great.
Going to be providing a briefing on the current war situation. There's a lot of people that want to know what the situation is, but I remember that I was here 2 years ago, literally days after October 7th, and the amount of tension regarding Israel's situation here was palpable. And I was one of three Israelis that were at the RJC that year. This year there was many more, including some wounded soldiers, one who received an award for courage here. I think it was one of the most meaningful presentations of the entire conference. And also last year when I was here, a much greater sense of urgency from the people worried about, what's going on in Israel. This time, a real sense of relief in terms of where Israel is, at this point compared to what they were, where Israel was, a year ago, 2 years ago. But still a lot of uncertainty. So I'll be providing some kind of an update on, where we are, what the accomplishments of the war have been, what some of the terms of the 20-point plan uh, look like, what are the major question marks for Israel as a result of this deal moving forward. Threats that involve Qataris and Turkey and others moving forward. What Israel needs to look out for, and then from here, I'm going to California. After a week in California, I'm going to be headed to New York for a few days, and then back to Israel. So next week, I'll probably also be doing this show from the road.
We'll do it again next week. Please God, Alex, good luck with your talk this morning, and thank you for all that important information from the RJC, and good luck with your travels as we go forward.
Thanks so much, Josh.
I want to thank everyone behind the scenes here on Jerusalem Minute: Yuri Sveretsky, Zach Sickerman, Esther Eden, and Ryan Lifshitz. Make sure you go to JNS TV, folks, for all the latest programming, including all of the activity there at the RJC in Las Vegas. You're not going to miss those videos. Go to jns.org for all the latest breaking news from Israel, the Middle East, and the entire Jewish world. We'll see you next week on Jerusalem Minute.